Jake was lost. He had been walking through the alien jungle for hours, trying to find his way back to his crashed shuttle. His communicator was dead, and his supplies were running low. But then, just when he thought he was completely alone, he heard loud sounds, cheering, drums. Stomping, he followed the noise. As he pushed past tall red vines and glowing plants, the jungle suddenly opened into a wide clearing. There it was, a massive stone arena, shaped like a bowl, packed with thousands of alien creatures. They were tall, powerful beings with smooth, dark skin, horns on their heads, and glowing blue eyes. Jake blinked in confusion. "Is this a festival?" he whispered to himself. He stepped closer. The crowd noticed him and roared even louder. They clapped and shouted something in their language. Jake couldn't understand a word, but they weren't attacking. In fact, some were even smiling at him. Jake gave a nervous smile and waved. That's when everything changed. The center of the arena opened, and a huge alien male stepped out. He wore thick armor and held a heavy staff. His body was covered in white scars. The crowd went wild, chanting his name. He walked straight toward Jake. Jake took a step back. "Hey, I think there's a mistake." "I'm not," but the giant alien slammed the staff on the ground, right in front of Jake's feet. A deep voice echoed through the air, translated by one of the nearby machines. "Challenge accepted. Let the mating trial begin." Jake froze. "Wait, mating? Trial?" Before he could speak again, a soft voice whispered behind him, "You have to fight. You're in the ritual now." Jake turned and saw a tall alien woman in a flowing dress. Her eyes were worried. She looked young, maybe his age in human terms. "Run, human," she said. "If you lose, they will kill you. But if you win..." She didn't finish the sentence. The giant alien roared and charged. Jake barely had time to move. The staff came down like thunder, smashing the ground. He rolled out of the way and grabbed a long stick from the arena floor, some kind of wooden weapon meant for the fight. "I didn't sign up for this," he shouted, ducking another swing, but the crowd loved it. They cheered louder. Some even threw flowers and small energy stones into the air. Jake was fast. He wasn't trained for this, but years of surviving alien planets gave him quick reflexes. The big warrior swung wide. Jake ducked, stepped in close, and by pure reflex, punched him in the jaw. There was a loud crack. The huge alien's eyes rolled back, and his body slammed into the dirt like a falling tree. Dust flew up everywhere. The arena went silent. Jake stood over the unconscious warrior, breathing hard. He looked up, confused and sweating. Then the silence broke. A horn blew, and the crowd exploded in cheers. Hundreds of female aliens rushed forward. Some threw cloth around his shoulders. Others knelt. One older alien in golden robes raised her arms and shouted, "The human is now champion." Jake looked around. Champion of what? The woman from before stepped beside him. She touched his hand gently. "You don't know, do you?" Jake shook his head. "Know what?" she sighed. "This is the ancient mating ritual of my people. Every 100 moons, the strongest males fight. The winner earns the right to choose from all the available females, or to let them choose him." Jake blinked. "Wait, I just punched a guy." "I didn't mean to win anything," she smiled softly. "But you did win. And now by law, you cannot walk away." Jake laughed nervously. "Well, I'm sure there's a form I can fill out. Some way to say, 'Sorry, wrong guy, my bad.'" But her expression turned serious. "No, human, you've been accepted by the arena. Refusing now would insult every family, every female here. You'd be declaring their ritual meaningless." Jake's smile faded. The crowd was still cheering. The fallen warrior was being carried out on a golden stretcher. Around Jake, the females looked at him with curiosity. And something more. The translator echoed again, "Prepare the chosen. The next trial begins at moonrise. Jake's heart pounded. There's another trial? The woman nodded. This was only the first. The next challenge is not of the body. Jake looked at the glowing sky above. A new moon was already rising. He had no idea what was coming next, but he had stepped into the arena. And now, there was no turning back. The cheers still echoed in the air, but Jake wasn't celebrating. He sat alone in a stone chamber beneath the arena. The walls glowed dimly, humming with strange alien energy. Outside, drums beat slowly like a warning, like the sound of something ancient waking up. Jake leaned forward, staring at his hands. I only hit him once, he whispered, but that single punch had changed everything. The massive alien warrior had been carried away unconscious. And Jake, the outsider, the lost human with no idea what he was doing, was now called champion of the mating ritual. It felt like a bad dream. The heavy door creaked open. Jake stood quickly, ready for another surprise. But it was the same alien woman from earlier, the one who had warned him to run. She walked in quietly, carrying a shallow bowl filled with glowing blue water. Drink, she said softly. You need strength. The next part begins soon. Jake frowned. Do I have to fight again? She gave him a strange look. No, this time, they want to test your heart. Jake raised an eyebrow. My heart, she nodded. You beat the body of the champion. Now they want to see if your soul is just as strong. He hesitated, then took a sip. The water tasted like cold wind and metal. It cleared his mind but made him feel watched. She sat down beside him. In our tradition, the next trial happens in the Mind Hall, she explained. You and the other remaining males will face the inner emotions of the females. You must connect with them, or they will reject you. Jake stared. Wait, what? I have to go into their feelings? She looked serious. Yes, if you fail to understand them. If you only see their bodies and not their pain, their memories, their dreams, you will be cast out. And here, being cast out means death. Jake rubbed his forehead. This planet really doesn't believe in second chances, huh? She smiled gently. We believe in truth. And truth comes out when you open your mind. Moment later, 2 armored females entered. Without a word, they took Jake through glowing tunnels until they reached a round chamber with a pool of silver light in the center. The Mind Hall. Dozens of males stood around it, some alien, some part machine. One even had feathers and a beak. They looked strong, proud, but nervous, like they had all trained for this moment and still felt unready. The high matron stepped forward. She looked at Jake last. The human enters by fate, she announced. He will walk the mines. If he fails, he will not walk again. Jake didn't like that sentence one bit. The matron continued, You may now step into the pool. Jake sighed. All right, I've done worse. Probably. He stepped into the silver light, and instantly, the world changed. He was no longer in the chamber. He stood in a memory, but not his own. It was a cold, lonely garden under 2 moons. A small alien girl stood in the corner, crying quietly as a male shouted at her from a distance. She hugged a broken toy to her chest. Jake felt the sadness hit him like a wave. This was real pain. A childhood memory. A wound never healed. She was told she wasn't strong enough, a voice echoed. Not good enough to be chosen. Not even good enough to be loved. Jake's chest ached. He took a step forward in the memory and knelt beside the small girl. I see you, he whispered. You're not alone. The light around him shifted. Another memory. Now, he stood before an older alien female, her face covered in scars. She was kneeling beside a grave. A tiny necklace lay in her hand. My mate died in the last ritual, she said. He wanted peace, but they fed him to tradition. Jake felt her sorrow, her rage, her exhaustion. She didn't want a warrior. She wanted someone who listened. Someone who didn't use strength to control, but used kindness to connect. "I'm sorry," Jake whispered, and something in the air changed again. When he opened his eyes, he was back in the chamber, covered in sweat. Breathing hard, the matron looked down at him. "You made it through." Jake stood slowly. He looked at the others. Many were still trapped in the pool, shaking or unconscious. Only 3 males had passed, and only 1 was human. The coroner, the same woman who warned Jake, stepped forward again. This time, she wore ceremonial robes. "I asked for the right to choose," she said loudly. She walked up to Jake and stood before him. "I choose the human." Gasps filled the chamber. The matron spoke slowly. "Then the human must now face the 3rd trial, for no bond can form until he survives the jealousy of others." Jake looked around. A dozen alien males now glared at him, muscles tense, eyes burning. He gulped. "Oh great," he muttered. "Here we go again." Jake was dreaming. At least he hoped it was a dream. He stood on a mountain of shattered weapons. The sky above was purple and red, and alien females stood in a circle around him, watching, waiting, but their faces were not kind. They looked like judges or executioners. Then he heard the voice again. That same deep, booming voice from the arena. "Accept what you've won, human, or die for insulting us all." Jake gasped and woke up. He was in a silk-covered chamber now, lying on soft cushions. Strange flowers floated in the air, glowing faintly. It should have felt peaceful, but it didn't. It was too quiet. He sat up. His body still ached from the mind trial. But something else was bothering him. The way those alien males had stared at him before, the way that matron spoke. He had passed the first test by mistake. He had passed the second test with compassion. Now the 3rd was coming, and this time, it wasn't about strength or heart. It was about power. And what happens when someone breaks the ancient order? The door slid open. The same female, the one who had warned him, helped him, and now chosen him, entered the chamber. She wore a silver robe, and her face was calm, but her hands were shaking. "Slightly. You're awake," she said. "Barely," Jake answered. "Did I really pass?" She nodded. "You did, but passing was the easy part." Jake tilted his head. "That's the easy part?" She looked him in the eyes. "You were chosen. That hasn't happened in generations. Females don't choose. They're taken, or they remain alone." Jake stood up. "So, you choosing me, that makes me a problem?" "It makes you a fire," she whispered. "And fire scares those who live in cold rules." Jake sighed. "All right, so what now? Another fight?" She shook her head. "Worse." She handed him a white cloth with a silver symbol. "What's this?" "The bond offering," she said. "You must wear it and walk into the next chamber. There, you must either accept the females who step forward, or reject them." Jake frowned. "Reject them?" "Yes," she said. "If you say no, they are marked. They can never join the ritual again. It's considered a deep shame. That's why most males just nod and take all." Jake looked down at the cloth. "And if I say no to all of them?" Her eyes widened. "Then the matrons will see it as a rejection of their entire tradition." Jake rubbed his face. "So no matter what I do, someone gets angry." She nodded. "But if I do accept?" She looked away. "Then you must live with them. Share food, space, warmth, and perhaps even bear young." Jake's heart skipped. This was more than a game, more than a test. It was a life sentence, and not just for him. He put on the cloth. The next chamber was vast. Dozens of females stood waiting in silence. They were tall, beautiful in strange ways, strong. But many looked afraid. One by one, they walked toward him. Each placed a hand on his chest. Each one whispered something only he could hear. "I don't "Wanna be alone anymore? Please don't send me back." You looked at me like I was a person. Jake's hands trembled. He couldn't say yes to all. He couldn't say no to all. So he did something no one expected. When the last one stepped forward, Jake stepped back. He took off the cloth and held it high. "I cannot choose," he said loudly. "Because they should choose me." Gasps echoed. Across the hall, one of the matrons stood sharply. "You dare twist the sacred rite?" Jake raised his voice. "You called me champion. Then let me change the game. Let them decide if I'm worthy." Silence. Then dash movement. The same female who had helped him stepped forward. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I still choose you." Another followed. Then another. And they. And 5 females stood beside him. But across the hall, rage was building. The male who Jake had knocked out in part 1 stormed into the room, his face still bruised, his pride shattered. He pointed at Jake and growled, "You stole what was mine. You shamed me. Now, I challenge you to the final trial." Jake didn't move, but deep inside he whispered to himself, "Of course there's a final trial. And this time, someone might not survive it." It was too quiet. Jake stood alone on a smooth black platform. No weapons, no armor. Just soft lights blinking around him and a deep hum rising from the floor. He looked up. A glass dome revealed a sky full of stars. Galaxies swirling, planets glowing, comets streaking silently. It should have been beautiful, but Jake's heart was pounding. A voice echoed from above. "This is the final trial, not of bone, not of blade. This is the trial of the soul." Jake frowned. "What does that mean?" A panel in the floor opened. From the darkness below, the defeated alien male, the one Jake knocked out in the first trial, rose slowly on a platform. But he didn't carry a weapon either. His eyes burned with fury. Across from him, the 5 alien females who had chosen Jake stepped onto another platform. Silent, still, watching. The high, matron's voice filled the air again. "You each now speak your truth. One wins, one loses, no blood, only honesty." Jake blinked. "Wait, this is a talking trial?" The angry alien male named Gauntlet stepped forward and growled, "You don't belong here, human. You came by accident. You didn't earn this." Jake crossed his arms. "I didn't come to take anyone. I didn't even know what was happening." Gauntlet snarled. "Exactly. And yet they chose you over me. I trained my whole life. I bled for this. You bled once." He pointed to the females. "They think you care, that you're soft, that you understand. But you'll leave. You'll grow bored. You'll betray them." Jake's face tightened. He looked at the females, then back at Gauntlet. "No," Jake said. "I won't lie. I never planned to stay. I came here because I crashed, but now I want to stay." He stepped forward, his voice louder now. "Because I saw something real. These women don't want a killer. They want peace. They want someone who listens, who stays even when he's scared, who chooses them, not because of a prize, but because he sees their worth." The room was silent. Jake continued, voice soft but clear. "You trained to fight them. I've learned to walk beside them." Gauntlet growled and stepped forward, fists clenched. "So you think that makes you better?" Jake shook his head. "No, it makes me different." Suddenly, the glass dome flickered, and images appeared all around them. Memories from Jake's mind. He saw his home Earth, his family, his lost crewmates, the crash, the fear, the silence, the loneliness, then his first moment in the arena. His first accidental punch, his first whisper to a crying alien child inside. The memory trial. His gentle words, his quiet eyes. One by one, the females looked at the memories. Their expressions changed. One of them, with green markings on her cheek, stepped forward and spoke. "He saw me when I hid. Not my body, not my rank, just me." Another followed. "He didn't take, he gave." The matron's voice filled the air again. "Then your hearts have spoken, and the trial is complete." A beam of golden light surrounded Jake. The alien crowd outside the chamber let out a sound, not quite a cheer, not quite a cry, something deep, something sacred. Jake turned to Gauntlet, but Gauntlet didn't speak. He lowered his head and stepped back into the darkness. He had lost, but not in battle. He had lost to something far more rare. Connection. Jake's heart beat fast. Not from fear, but from realization. This wasn't just about survival anymore. He had become a symbol, the first male chosen not for strength, but for soul. The matron appeared before him now, her long robes glowing in the soft light. "You have changed the ritual," she said. Jake looked nervous. "Is that okay?" She smiled. "No," she said. "It is better." But then her face grew serious. "Now comes the real decision. You accepted their hearts. Will you accept their lives too?" Jake blinked. "What do you mean?" She pointed to the 5 females. "If you accept them, they will leave their homes, their clans, their old lives. You become their bond, their home, their protector." Jake looked at the women standing before him. He wasn't ready, but maybe. "No one ever really is," he nodded slowly. "I accept." And the room glowed brighter, but deep within the shadows, someone else was watching. Hidden matron, one who hated change, one who believed the old way must return, and she would not stay silent for long. Asterisk. The celebration didn't last long. As Jake stood under the glowing sky with 5 alien women by his side, the air began to shift, not from wind or sound, but from tension. A quiet storm was brewing beneath the surface. High above the arena, behind black stone walls, the shadow matrons gathered. They were the secret voices of the old ways, the ones who believed females must never choose, that love was weakness, that humans were filth, that Jake's victory was a curse. One of them, cloaked in dark blue, stepped forward. Her name was Jera, the Iron Voice, and her eyes were like cold ash. "This human must be removed," she hissed, "before he infects the others." The other elders agreed. "We declare war of tradition." Down below, Jake didn't know any of this. He was sitting beside a glowing pool with one of the chosen women, Vila, the green-marked one who had spoken for him in the soul trial. She dipped her fingers into the water and watched the ripples dance in the light. "You changed everything," she said quietly. Jake shrugged. "I didn't mean to." "That's why it matters," she replied. Before he could answer, a scream echoed through the trees. Jake jumped to his feet. Vela stood too, her body tensed out. From the far end of the temple, fire burst into the air. Alien soldiers in dark armor stormed through the gates, weapons drawn. They wore the symbol of the shadow matrons, an old mark, once banned by the council. They were not here to talk. They were here to take the women back. Jake barely had time to grab a broken staff lying nearby. The guards rushed toward them. One reached for Vila. Jake slammed the staff into the alien's chest, knocking him into a wall. Another guard slashed at Jake's shoulder, drawing blood. The fight was fast, messy but not without meaning. Jake didn't fight like a warrior. He fought like a man protecting his new family, and that made him dangerous. Suddenly, a familiar voice rang out from the fire. Enoug. It was the High Matron, the one who had overseen all 3 trials. Her voice shook the trees. "These 5 women have chosen, and the human has accepted." Jera stepped forward from the shadows, her face like stone. "Then they are traitors," she said, "and must be punished as such." Jake stood between the guards and the women. Blood ran down his arm, but he didn't care. "You want them?" he said, voice firm. "You'll have to get through me first." Jera laughed. "You think you can stop an empire, human?" Jake's eyes narrowed. "No, but I can start something bigger." He turned to the crowd that had gathered during the chaos. Dozens of females, young, old, warriors, mothers. They had watched him win. They had seen him care. Jake raised his voice. How many of you are tired of being taken, of having no choice, of being treated like things? The silence was sharp. Then dash movement. One female stepped forward and stood behind Jake. Then another. Then 10 more. Then 100. They didn't carry weapons. They didn't need to. They stood with him. Jera's face twisted with hate. So be it. You've chosen rebellion. We answer with fire. She raised her hand. The soldiers aimed their weapons. But then, boom! An explosion rocked the far side of the arena. Smoke and dust filled the air, and from that smoke stepped Gauntlet, the alien male Jake had defeated in the first trial. But this time, he wasn't wearing armor. He wore plain clothes. And beside him were 10 other males who had walked away from the shadow matrons. I was trained to fight, Gauntlet said. But the human taught me how to protect. He walked to Jake and held out a blade handle first. I follow you now. Jake stared at him, stunned. The old world was cracking, and a new one was rising from the fire. But Jera wasn't done. She turned and disappeared into the smoke, whispering one final warning. This isn't over. The last trial will be your death. Jake looked at the sky. War had begun, and next time, there would be no rules left to break. The rain fell for the first time in months, but it wasn't water. It was ash. The sky over the alien capital had turned gray, thick with smoke from fires still burning. The old towers, once glowing symbols of ancient rules, now stood cracked, crumbling. And in the center of the great city, on the broken steps of the Hall of Judgment, Jake stood bleeding. His shirt was torn. His left arm hung uselessly at his side. Blood dripped down his fingers. One eye was swollen shut. But he didn't fall, not yet. All around him, the alien crowd stood, silent. Watching. He had taken the spear. For her. It had happened so fast. Vela, his chosen, was speaking to the matrons, begging for peace, for choice, for freedom. She stood tall, brave, unarmed. Then a soldier from the shadows had thrown the spear straight at her back. Jake didn't think. He moved. He stepped in front of her and let the weapon slam into his shoulder. The pain was bright, hot, like fire ripping through his bones. But he stayed standing. And now here he was, bleeding on sacred ground. One human, defending something no alien warrior ever had. A woman's right to choose. The high matron stepped forward slowly, her face pale with shock. He bled, she said softly. Not for glory, not for rule, but for love. Another elder whispered. No warrior in 1,000 seasons has done this. Behind Jake, Vela pressed her hand to the wound. Her eyes were filled with fear and something more. Pride. You fool, she whispered. You didn't have to do that. Jake gave a tired smile. I didn't have time to think. Then he collapsed to one knee. Not from weakness, but from choice. I don't want a throne, he said. I don't want power. I just want them to be free. He looked up at the matrons. Can't you see? They're not your property. They're people. The wind shifted. More females stepped forward from the crowd, young and old, warriors and mothers. Some held children. Others wore scars. All carried the same fire in their eyes. One by one, they knelt beside Jake. Vela joined them, wrapping her arms around him, supporting his broken body. Then, to the shock of everyone, even Gert Hall knelt. The matrons looked at one another. They had lost the crowd. They had lost control. And then, a soft chant began to rise. One voice, then 2, then hundreds. Corinde. Jake blinked. What's that mean? Vela smiled through her tears. It means the Bleeding King. It's a name from our oldest stories. A king who never wore a crown but earned the hearts of the people. Jake laughed weakly. I'm not a king. No, Vila said. But you're what we needed. Suddenly, drums echoed from beyond the city walls. War drums. Jera had returned. This time she brought an army. The shadows marched thousands of warriors loyal to the old code, ready to crush the rebellion before it spread. But Jake didn't flinch. He stood barely still. Bleeding still strong. And behind him stood the new world. Not built by force, but by love, pain, and choice. Asterisk. They came at dawn. No horns, no warnings. Only the sound of footsteps, thousands of armored feet marching like thunder across the stone plains. The army of the old world had arrived, led by Jera, the Iron Matron. Their black banners flew high, marked with the ancient symbol of silence, control, and fear. In her eyes burned cold hate. He turned our daughters into rebels, she spat. Today, the human dies, and the old order returns. But at the center of the city, something else was happening. Jake stood on the balcony of the half-ruined temple, arms still wrapped in blood-soaked cloth, his body weak but his voice firm. Below him gathered an ocean of people, not warriors, mothers, daughters, sons, elders, friends. And beside him stood his 5 chosen women, Vila among them, her hand in his. Jake didn't raise a weapon. He raised his voice. They want to destroy me, he said, but this was never about me. He turned to the crowd. They fear what I've given you, freedom. Not from them, but from fear itself. He looked toward the horizon, where black specks of Jera's army marched closer. You don't have to fight. But if you believe in something better, then stand with me. Silence. Then movement. G. Otel stepped forward, now wearing a simple band around his wrist, the mark of a free male who serves by choice. He slammed his weapon to the ground. I stand with the bleeding king. Then another, and another. And then thousands rose, not just with weapons, but with courage. The city didn't have walls, but it had heart. The battle that followed was not clean. It was fire and smoke, spears and screams. Old verses against new voices. Jake fought, not with strength, but with example. When a young alien soldier hesitated in fear, Jake didn't kill him. He reached out a hand. The boy dropped his weapon. When Vila's sister was surrounded, Jake took the hit meant for her leg. When a mother fell protecting her child, Jake carried them both to safety. Every action echoed, and with every echo, the old world cracked. Even Jera could feel it. As her army started to fall back, as her soldiers looked with doubt, she rushed forward toward Jake with a blade in her hand. You ruined everything, she screamed. Jake caught the blade in his bare hand. Blood dripped again, but his grip didn't break. No, he said. I gave them something real. She tried to pull away, but he held steady. You led by fear, I bled by choice. That's the difference. And then she fell to her knees. Her army scattered. It was over. Days passed. The fires cooled. The wounds began to heal. And Jake sat beneath the twin suns, his 5 companions beside him, children playing nearby, and strangers stopping only to bow their heads in quiet thanks. A council was built, not ruled by warriors or matrons, but by voices of the people, both male and female. And though Jake refused any title, they still whispered his name, Corenda, the bleeding king, the human who bled not for power, but for love. A legend born not from conquest, but from accident, kindness, and courage.